I thought this was the scroll saw workshop. Stay tuned. Okay, let me explain why we are over in the other side of my workshop up here on the workbench that I generally do my electronics work on. That's because I have been given the opportunity to review a product from a company called Inventables out of Chicago, and their website is inventables.com, and they manufacture CNC machines. A while back I was able to get a hold of this CNC machine for free from Inventables, and their only request was that I do a video review of it, post it on my blog, and just give an honest and fair review of the machine, and that's what I plan to do tonight. Now again, I want to stress that this machine was given to me for free, so you can consider whatever biases in that you want to consider, but I think I can give a fair review, and that's what I plan to do tonight. The first thing I want to talk about before we get into the review of this machine is why I decided to do the review in the first place, since my blog is dedicated to the art of the scroll saw. Well, over the years I've received literally hundreds of emails from people in the CNC community and also the laser cutting and engraving community wanting to know if they could use my patterns or if I would make my patterns available to them also. And I really didn't have enough knowledge with these machines to be able to answer that question very well. Some of those people were able to take the patterns and they knew enough about the software to make it work, but I wasn't able to help them, and I always wanted to be able to provide that help to those people also. So when Inventables gave me the opportunity to review this saw, that was my intention. What I plan to do, and it's going to take a long time, it's not going to happen overnight, but what I plan to do is, as I design patterns that I think are appropriate for the CNC machine on the scroll saw, I will convert those patterns over to be used on the CNC machine. And that's going to take a little while. I put a couple patterns up on the Inventables site already, just as practice, but as I learn the software better, I'll be doing more of that. Now let's talk a little bit about the machine itself. The x-carve CNC machine comes in a couple different flavors. They have the 1000 millimeter wasteboard machine, which is considerably larger than this machine. This is the 500 millimeter, and it has a much smaller cut surface. Now, when Inventables gave me the opportunity to go on the website and select the machine I wanted, I intentionally went with a smaller machine because I think it's more appropriate in a scroll saw workshop where I'm trying to design patterns for the scroll saw that they be able to be cut also on a CNC machine, and I just didn't need the bigger machine to do that for the type of projects that I design. I also had a space problem here in my workshop. I'm running out of room. So the 500 millimeter I knew would sit over here on this workbench where my electronic gear is really well. So that's what I've done. So I've placed it over here on this workbench, and so far that's worked out great. For those of you on my blog who may not be familiar with a CNC machine, it stands for Computer Numerical Control, and what it is, it's a router or cutting device that can be moved by the computer in 3 different axes on this particular machine. This machine can move in the Y direction, back and forth. It can move in the X direction, which is left and right, and it can move in the Z axis, which is up and down. So what that allows you to do is put a cutter in this, and it's called a spindle, or some of you might call it a router. Put a cutter in this spindle, and you're able to cut patterns that you've designed on your computer. Now let's talk about cost. These machines are not cheap, but they have come down in price so much over the years, especially recently, that a lot of garage workshops can now afford to have one of these machines in their shop. This model, which is fully loaded, would probably cost about $1,000, a little bit more than $1,000. The basic unit on this side, without some of the extra features, would be about $935, somewhere in that range. And you can add and subtract features to this as you're going down through the web page to make your order. And it will take a little research on your part to know what features you need and what you don't. I would recommend that you get it fully loaded, minus maybe a couple of features like the limit switches that you can get. I haven't found those to be very useful yet. They're really not limit switches, but we won't go into that right now. But some of the other features like a better spindle might be a good ideal. I would upgrade to the Acme Z-axis rod. So do your research, understand what you're getting before you place an order, and you'll be happier with the projects you're going to make. Okay, now let's take a minute and talk about some of the projects that you can make with a CNC machine like this. Now, coming from a scroll saw workshop and primarily spending my time designing patterns for the scroll saw, I was interested if I could use this machine to duplicate some of the work I do on the scroll saw. So with that, I'm going to zoom in here and show you a couple projects to answer that question. Here's an example of something that we might cut out on a scroll saw. It's just the outline of a hand mirror, and you can see the CNC machine was able to cut the recess that we can glue the mirror into. Now I just cut this out as a sample and it's just MDF, but you can imagine this would look very nice if it was cut in some nice walnut or something like that. Now the really interesting thing is, let's take a look at the back. You can use your CNC machine to personalize it, in this case with my wife's name and a flower under it. So I think you can see, very cool project. Again, just made from scrap wood or MDF, but I was just looking for samples. Here's another project that I cut on the CNC machine, and it's a little basket that I think you'll think looks pretty familiar, especially if you're used to working in the projects on my scroll saw workshop. And again, this is just concentric rings that were cut out on the CNC machine. The bottom was cut, the top was cut, and everything was glued together to make this little basket. So you can see, I basically started the machine up. I went in and had dinner, came back out, and it was pretty much done. All I had to do was glue it together. Let's take a look at another project. Another thing I was interested in is how well this CNC machine could cut more intricate fretwork. Well, right now I'm doing my Christmas ornaments, my custom Christmas ornaments, and here's an example that was cut out on the CNC machine of my daughter's name and a Christmas wreath. Now you'll see one thing here that might be a little confusing, is why is this so big as a Christmas ornament? The bits that I have were too big to cut this pattern any smaller. I hadn't purchased any smaller bits yet for the CNC machine. So I resized this to make the CNC able to cut out these interior cuts. One thing about the CNC machine is the bits are round. So when you have an interior corner, it has to round it off because, like I say, the bit's round, whereas a scroll saw blade could come in and make that nice and sharp. But the smaller the bits are, of course, the less of a problem that becomes. And you can get some very tiny bits. I only had one that was 1/32 of an inch in diameter, and I broke it. That's another thing that you'll see on a CNC machine, is you have to learn how much cut you can make with a bit before you put too much stress on it and break it. Here are a couple more examples of just some practicing I was doing. Of course, there's my wife's name cut in a nice piece of maple. Here is a little different way of carving out letters on the x-carve machine, and you can see this is more of a where this would be kind of a relief cut. I guess this would be the opposite of that. So you can see the letters stand out here, and you can see the x-carve did this in MDF very well. Another sign that I cut was basically just this little simple sign where I was working with different colors, and all I did on this was had the CNC machine carve out the letters, and then I spray painted the entire surface with red paint, went over it with my sander, sanded off all the paint from the top, and it left the letters colored in. As I was practicing, trying to just find out how accurate this machine could cut, I decided to measure the size of a quarter and see how well I could make it fit. And you can see that in this little sample that the CNC machine was able to recess this quarter into this piece of MDF, and it's such a snug fit I can't even get it back out. I'd have to tear the board up to get it out. So the accuracy is very, very high. Okay, the last example I want to talk about now is the ability of the x-carve to do 3D carving. And this was pretty much right off the machine without a lot of sanding. And I also used a 1/8 inch bit to cut this, so the detail was a little bit taken down because of that. But with the proper software, you can do this type of work also, which obviously gives you some, some limitless ideas of making projects. Now, the software that I use to cut this eagle out is called Carve Pro, and it's a very expensive piece of software. It's $600. So you're getting up close to the cost of the machine just in the software to carve this out. Now, if you want to do more of this type of project on the CNC machine, you can use free software such as well, not free, but I use CorelDRAW to make this pattern. So CorelDRAW Home Student's about $100 on Amazon, a little bit more. So you could use that. The free software you could use, of course, would be something like Inkscape, which you can find at inkscape.org. And those are vector-based graphics programs that you can go in and make your designs on and then export them as an SVG file, and then you can load them into the Easel software for carving. Now what I want to do is show you the process of making a carving on the x-carve machine. Basically, we're going to take our blank and measure it so we know the dimensions of the lumber, and we're going to clamp that blank down to the table using the supplied clamps that come with it. And you can also, of course, make your own clamps, but you can also use two-sided tape. There are several different ways of clamping a workpiece down, but in this case I'm going to use these clamps. Get it clamped down nice and tight. And at this point I'm going to turn the CNC machine on, because what we have to do when we start out the project is get the CNC machine in a home position. And you can start out in different places, but I like to start down here in this lower left hand corner. And when we design the patterns, that's where the machine will know to start at. So in this case, I'm going to bring up the Easel software over here. And I'm just going to use the keyboard keys to jog this spindle and bit to that left lower hand corner of this wood blank. So there I've got the Y pretty close. Now I'm going to move the X. And I'm pretty close there, close enough for what we're going to do. Now we also need to move the Z where the bit is just touching the piece of wood, right there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you over to the Easel software and show you how we set up the pattern from there. What you see on the screen right now is the monitor from the computer that I have hooked up to the x-carve. And this is not going to be a tutorial of how to use this software. This is just a basic overview of the process that you'll use to make your carvings. Easel is online software, and again it's available at easel.com, and what it allows you to do is to take these drawing tools and draw basic shapes onto the screen. In this case, here's a square that we could move down into our work surface, and you can see over here on the actual 3D view that right now if we carve this piece, we would have this pocket carved into this piece of wood right here. With it selected, we can select the depth that we want our CNC machine to carve to. So you can see in this case, I made it the full depth of the wood, so it's going to carve all the way through that piece of wood. That's if we have it set over here to fill. If we go over here to outline, we can set to have it carve on the path, and you can see it'll carve through the wood, but it'll leave this interior piece available for us to use. So if we wanted to carve, for instance, a certain size box out, we could do that. We can also, depending on what your needs are, is we can carve on the outside of the line or on the inside of the pattern line. So depending on your project, you can do that. Let's delete that out of there. Easel also allows us to select these different fonts and put text on the screen, and then of course we can modify this text to be anything we want. So if this was a box top, for instance, then maybe we would we would make this somebody's name here on this piece of wood, And you can see right here again that that text would be carved into the piece of wood. Now what I have here, let me delete that. What I have here on the corner of this blank is just a piece of clip art that I downloaded from the internet on one of the clip art sites, and I let x-carve cut the outline of this shape out, and that's what you're going to see in this upcoming video, is you're actually going to see this being cut. There's other features up here. You can see we have very basic drawing features. We can draw circles, triangles, stars. We also have a list of add-ons that you can use if you wanted to cut out a box. This is a generator that'll cut the dog bone shapes for your box to put together. We can image vectorization, which means we can bring in an image from the web and actually have this software turn it into a set of vectors that the machine can cut. So there's several different little things here you can do too, like putting text on a curve, cutting polygons, you can cut gears out, lots of stuff you can do here, and they're going to be adding more to this as time goes on. So once we get our design on the piece of wood that we have, and in this case we've got a piece of wood that's 6 inches by 4 inches, and we actually had to go in and tell the software that that was the dimensions of the wood. And this is where under materials I selected maple, and I selected 6 inches for the X dimension, 4 inches for the Y dimension, and the board is a 1/4 of an inch thick. And of course that would be very important if you wanted the x-carve to cut all the way through it. It would need to know how thick it was. So once you do that, you go over here to machine and you set up the size of bit you're going to use. Now for the pattern that we're getting ready to cut here, the bit is a V bit, and it makes it very hard because it's so thin to see it in the software. So I actually set it up for a 1/16 inch bit just so you can see it better here. But with the V bit I actually set it at 0.005 to get a very fine cut. Once we have the design all set up and ready to go, all we have to do is go up here to carve. We confirm the thickness of the wood. In this case it's a 1/4 of an inch thick, and we hit this button right here. We hit the confirm button that the material is secured to the waste board, so it's not going to move. We tell it what size bit we're going to use, and you can type in whatever size down here you need, but if you have a 1/16 inch bit in the spindle, you want to select that here. You confirm the size of the bit. This next screen is where we confirm that the bit is currently in the home position, and that's what we did a minute ago when we actually moved that bit to the lower left hand corner. We hit confirm. At that point we can hit this bit to raise the spindle up off of the piece of wood. We'll go ahead and do that. You can't see that, but you probably heard it. We can then turn the spindle on, and you'll hear the spindle start up. Then we confirm that the spindle's on so the software knows that we did it, and then all we have to do is hit start carving, and the machine will begin to make the carving that you're about to see. So with that, let's watch the carving and then we'll come back. Here's what we just made the carving of. I used a V-bit and just carved a sample from a piece of clip art that I got off the web. I was able to import this into Easel and use a V-bit to make the cut on it. And I think you can see that if you were doing a nice box, presentation box, and you wanted a nice design on the cover, you could put these in each corner and it would look really nice. Okay, now I want to end up with the scary part of this whole machine. This machine comes as a kit and you do have to put it together. And it is not a small job. It's not a job that you can't do. You can do it. Now I've got 37 years of experience as an electronics technician, so I have probably some skills that made some parts of this process easier than it might be for others. But if you go online and you look at the videos on YouTube, there's plenty of people out there that are building these machines that have zero experience at all. A lot of luthiers that build guitars and other instruments are using the x-carve CNC machine, and they have background in woodworking, but they don't necessarily have any electronics background. There's other people that are scale model builders that don't have experience in any woodworking or any electronics, and they have been able to purchase this machine and put it together. I got this machine on a Friday afternoon. I worked on it for about 2 hours. The first night I probably worked 4 hours on Saturday and maybe another hour on Sunday, and I had it put together. So somewhere between that 8 and 10 hour range, you're going to have this machine running. Now, one thing you want to do before you start this build is you want to go on the Inventables website and YouTube and watch the videos and read the forum for the problems you can have putting this together, so you know to avoid those problems. And that's what I did. Little tips like making sure the belts are tied down before you tighten them, because they'll stretch if you don't. Lots of little tips like that you're going to find online. And again, this is a machine that you want to do your research on. You want to know what you're doing, what you're getting into before you get started. The machine comes in a bazillion parts, but the great thing is that Inventables has taken the time to package each of those parts with part numbers, and they arranged it beautifully. Of all the kits I've built in my life, this is the one that has been the most fun to build, and it was the most fun to build simply because Inventables did such a good job of arranging the kit so it was so easy to put together. Inventables also, on their forum, they have a complete set of video instructions on how to put this together, and you do it in stages. When you first start, you're going to start by building the I believe you start with the X carriage. And you go to that video section, you watch him do it, then underneath the video is all the written instructions. And what you want to do is watch the video, then read down through the written instructions, and then proceed with your build. And I think you're going to find that it's much easier than it looks when you first open the box. There are a few areas in the instructions on Inventables that can be confusing, but that's only because there are different options for this machine, and depending on whether you bought that particular option, the instructions might be a little different. Or it'll say do this if you bought this option, but skip this step if you didn't. So if you just watch the video and you don't read the instructions below it, you might make some mistakes there. When you get done, if you have problems, the forum is a great place to go and ask the questions for the problems you may be having. A lot of people on there have built this machine plus more, and they're very good at being able to help answer the questions. You can also call Inventables, and their support people will help you. I didn't have any significant problems. When I got done, I don't believe that I had to back up for anything. The only thing that I did wrong when I was making the build was I actually put this rail on upside down, so when I got ready to install the stops for the limit switches, I couldn't get it installed over here on this rail. And after I looked at the limit switches and what they were used for, I realized they weren't that important, because they're really not limit switches, they're homing switches, and you end up doing the homing yourself manually. So to me it wasn't that big a deal, so I never haven't changed it yet. I just left the limit switches unplugged. Let's see, what else? There are some adjustments you'll have to do. The wheels that these carriages move on, these V wheels, some of them have eccentrics in them, and that's what you use to adjust the carriages to make sure they're tight. You want to make sure you go through and do those adjustments. One of the issues I had after I used it for a while that I didn't notice at first is if I made very, very light passes, like 1/100 of an inch deep cut in the back and in the front, the bit would not go into the wood in the back as deep as it would in the front. And what I had to do was loosen some of these screws and adjust the wasteboard so it was perfectly level front to back. And the way I did that was I just brought the bit to the front and I set it at exactly 1/4 of an inch. Then I moved the bit to the back, put that 1/4 of an inch spacer under there again, and just adjusted the table until it was even front to back. Let's see, the electronics package over here that you can't see very well might be one of the more complicated areas for you. The machine is controlled by a small processor board, and you will actually be putting that board in the case and doing the wiring. The wiring goes through these chain guards right here, and it's not complicated, but if you buy the limit switches or the homing switches, those do have to be soldered. If you don't buy those, you don't really have to do any soldering, so that's not too big a deal. The electronics package probably took me a couple hours to put together just because I was being extra careful, and when I got done I wanted to put this shielding around all the cables as I built it, so I spent a little more time doing that. But again, the instructions on inventable.com are very good, and I don't anticipate you're going to have any problems there. Another thing to consider is that you'll want a pretty good selection of bits, and the bits are different shapes to give you different types of cuts. For instance, these bits on the end here are engraving bits, and they come to a very fine point. I've got some bullnose bits that are rounded, so when you're doing a relief carving like you saw that eagle and it goes up and down, it makes a nice smooth transition. The end mills are flat bottomed bits, and they make a nice smooth surface on the bottom. There's different types of end mills, so there's a considerable amount of research you have to do to understand the bits, when to use them and how to use them. So that's another thing you're going to spend some time learning. It's also important that you know the exact thickness of the material that you're cutting, and a pair of these electronic calipers are really handy to do that. It's hard to do it with a ruler, and if you know the exact dimension of your wood, you'll set your project up a lot more accurately. Let's see, the machine can carve into wood, it can carve into plastics, it can carve into some soft metals such as aluminum. Again, you have to have the right bits, you have to know, how to set those bits up as far as speed and depth of cut and things like that. But that just comes with research. Now, I'm in the middle of my research on this machine. I've come a long way in the 3 weeks that I've had it, but every day I'm going on the Inventable site, I'm going on YouTube, I'm going on different CNC forums, and I'm learning more and more and more. As I'm learning more, I'm enjoying it more because I'm understanding what I'm doing better. So again, this is not a machine that you're going to buy, you're going to take it out of the box and cut something that night and be happy with the results. It's not going to work that way. You're going to have to learn the ins and outs of this machine, and that will take a little time. There are a few options that I want to add to my x-carve that I think will make it a better machine. You can get different mounts for the spindle, and probably what most people are doing that's the most successful for them is they buy the mount that will allow you to put I think it's the DeWalt 660, I believe is the model number of that particular router, and it replaces this spindle, and it's much more powerful. And people are finding that they have great results for that with that. And Inventables does sell a different base right here to attach that DeWalt router to the machine. Another thing, a lot of guys put a dust shoe down here so they can have ongoing dust collection while the machine's running. I haven't found that necessary yet, but I haven't done very big projects yet, so I may end up adding that as we go along. Okay, I'm going to end up this rather long video, and I don't really want to call it specifically a review because it's more of an overview review of this product to give you some idea of what it is, the reason that I have it in the shop and what I'm going to do with it, and a little bit about the machine as far as what it can and can't do. So if you're interested in this project, jump over to inventables.com. Do your research, and I think you'll find that it's a really interesting machine. I am very pleased with this machine. It's not an easy machine to work with. It does take some time to learn, but the results that I'm already getting from it, I'm very happy with. Some of the scroll saw projects that I've converted over to this machine and cut have gone well. Now, I haven't used a lot of real material yet. I've been using scrap material, plywood, just different pieces of MDF to learn what I'm doing. But I'm really quickly now going to start transitioning over to some real projects, and as I do those, I'll try to bring that back to a video or show you on my blog. to keep you up to speed if you're interested in following what I'm doing here. Now this is not going to change what I do on my blog. I'm a scroll sawer. I'm a scroll saw pattern designer. I'm going to continue to do that. I'm not going to shift my attention over to this machine. What I'm going to do is I'm going to spend a little bit of extra time converting what patterns that I can as I learn how to do it over to people who do use this machine. I think this machine is going to be great for me to build small, well, for instance, here's a good example right here. This machine has a Z-axis where this spindle goes up and down, and it's very hard to grab this belt and turn it. So all I did was put a piece of oak down, designed myself a knob that fit exactly onto this bolt, popped it on there, and I've got a tool here now that I can turn this and raise this spindle up and down really easy. So, you know, here's a tool making a tool for itself, and that was one of those aha moments. Oh, this thing can do some interesting stuff. So I'm going to end it here. I'm Steve Good. Again, this is the Scroll Saw Workshop. See you next time.